Let's set the stage a little bit. I've been fascinated lately with Columbia University. I had a few mountains to move early on in this voyage. Difficult mountains to move in terms of rewiring people's perceptions of the institutions they see around them, so-called democratic institutions across the whole society. Government agencies, private sector institutions, civil society institutions, and media institutions. And we moved the needle on DHS, CISA. We moved the needle on USAID and NED and all that. We moved the needle on probably 15 to 20 medium-sized ones. But there's a really big one we need to move the needle on, and that's universities. Universities play a major role in all of American life. People think about universities in the context of the education curriculum is woke in universities. That's a lot of what MAGA sort of focuses on. The left will focus on the cost of college education, primarily, student loan debt. But universities play a major role at every level of society. It's not just your 4 years between being 18 and 22. Most people today come out of college something like $200,000 in debt. They are debt slaves because of having to go to college, and you have to go to college if you want to get a white-collar job. So they're the pipeline every midwit striver has to pass through, even though, for me, I learned basically nothing in college. I went to a pretty good one. I'm glad I went because it was fun. I had a great time. You learn a lot about life in a college environment, but not for my classes. Thought the whole thing was just completely insane. But there's several other aspects of universities and colleges that are much more than meets the eye. For example, universities are the largest employers in the regions they sit in. They play a major role in regional development. They play a major role in city politics. They're a hub for industry in the region. They are a hub for attracting investment. The city is dependent on the university for its own lifeline. Economically, institutionally, young children are dependent on the university to get the diploma so they can get a job. But what I find so fascinating about universities, it goes a step beyond that, which is that governments are dependent on universities because they play an indispensable role in back-channel statecraft. Every major university is an instrument of statecraft. Every single major university, no exceptions. To borrow a phrase from the autobiography of Joe Biden's CIA director, a back channel means an interlocutor, a in-between, a middleman. Think of it like an escrow agreement, but for diplomacy and negotiation. Instead of the State Department or the CIA delivering the message, they have university faculty deliver it in exchange programs. They have university faculty or people at centers or institutes at universities travel to Russia or China or Venezuela to get the information that would not otherwise be given to a government agent. They also play a major role in emigre resettlements. When we have a political figure that we're trying to promote in a foreign country, we bring them over to our universities to train them, to fund them, to arm them effectively with the U.S. network, to fasten them, lock them into the node. So, Columbia University, I've been thinking about this a lot. I did this post about Maria Ressa. I started off by saying I've been watching this USAID, NED, CIA puppet Maria Ressa campaign for global internet censorship for 8 years now. So this clip triggered me.
The role of journalists in a country, in a democracy like the Philippines, like the United States, is to hold power to account. And I believe that that is why, you're not going to have an influencer or a content creator stand up to a dictator. You're not going to have someone have a set of principles, of standards and ethics that actually pushes against their own self-interest. We're seeing all of these begin to fall, but here's the thing. Part of what triggered that is the technology, the public information ecosystem we live in. Journalists and news organizations have been under attack from the very beginning. So your lack of faith in that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You lose journalism the way we practice it, you lose democracy.
Democracy just means blob control. So, that was this week. Maria Ressa's back. And it's such a funny story because I don't get to talk about this all that often. See, I always talk about this story in terms of Brexit and the Trump election. Ukraine, Crimea in 2014, U.S. coup, Eastern Ukrainian counter coup, Crimea annexation, NATO decides the military needs to take control over the media, hybrid warfare doctrine, we're off to the races with internet censorship. And then I usually fast forward to Brexit in June 2016, Trump wins November 2016. But there was another election the CIA lost that year that unleashed Maria Ressa on the world. That was the May 2016 Philippines election, Duterte. And it was obvious to me as early as like 2018 when I was tracking Maria Ressa. What the heck is this person doing at every one of these CIA, intelligence, statecraft, NED, USAID meetings? I'm like, what the heck is going on with this person? She's supposed to be an independent journalist at this dinky little pop-up news outlet called Rappler. How the hell is she sitting right next to Hillary Clinton and Mike Pompeo and John Kerry and Barack Obama? How is she at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and the Atlantic Council and Council on Foreign Relations? What the heck is going on? So it takes like 3 seconds of Googling. Just type in Philippines threat to democracy, and you just see the deluge of Journal of Democracy white papers on the scourge of Duterte. He needs to be overthrown. We need to coup him out of office. And Maria Ressa was just basically a hit piece for hire. She was a spook journalist. She was their asset in the Philippines. So this is pre-Brexit. This is a month before Brexit this happened. Now, when you look at the Atlantic Council, Brookings, CFR thought leadership on what happened in the Philippines, they assessed that they lost the Philippines because of Facebook. Something like 85% of the internet in the Philippines is just Facebook, or at least it was between 2016 and 2018. And the problem is like Duterte was hugely popular with his own people. They wanted to censor him. So they had to come up with this concept that authoritarians were weaponizing free speech online. They didn't quite say it like that. They were like, the authoritarian toolkit includes digital disinformation and populism and clickbait headlines and false and misleading news. And we can't suck more funds out of U.S. taxpayers sufficient to overcome this. So we should promote internet censorship. If we can't turn our own message up anymore, well, then we should work to turn their message down by putting pressure on the platforms, by putting pressure on regulators, by changing hearts and minds to make censorship acceptable. So I did this post. I've been watching this USAID, NED, CIA puppet, Maria Ressa campaign for global internet censorship for 8 years now. And literally, I have never seen an internet censorship law in a region that the State Department wants to regime change that Maria Ressa has not actively campaigned for. Whether the EU Digital Censorship Act, the UK Online Harms Bill, the Brazil censorship activity, if there is a censorship law to be found that's backed by the blob, Maria Ressa will be on TV somewhere promoting it. Of course, she was a Nobel Peace Prize winner. And of course, it was to safeguard freedom of expression. She just wants CIA media pumped into the area. Freedom for her to print her bullshit, but censorship for anyone who opposes her. She joins other Nobel Peace Prize CIA people. The Dalai Lama was, like Maria Ressa, also a Nobel Peace Prize winner backed by the CIA. You can make an argument about Barack Obama too, I should know, right? So, I mean, nobody's ever in the United States seen a news article that Maria Ressa has written. You may have seen like op-eds. What I'm trying to say is this person has no business having direct meetings with the head of USAID, Samantha Power. CIA Central, NED, literally conceived in the office of the CIA in 1983. Its founders said we created this because the CIA wasn't allowed to do it anymore. So the endowment is doing now what the CIA used to do so that when we fund groups, it doesn't look like the CIA is subsidizing them. The CIA gets a copy of every grant that NED makes. And here's Maria Ressa 3 years ago doing panels with the head of NED on the global threat to democracy from disinformation. She's named the chairperson of NED's World Movement for Democracy, which is basically like a spook accelerator program. It's just basically a network of networks of all their assets in the different countries. What are your credentials for this? I've never heard of you, and I think all of Britain wants to know who hired you. Done by Nigel Farage. What are your credentials for all of these senior leadership positions? All you do is complain about other people posting on the internet. What did she do? She worked as a reporter for CNN's Southeast Asia desk. That's it. CNN reporter, and then starts her own shop that nobody's ever heard of. How do you end up the chairperson of NED's global network of networks? How do you end up winning the Nobel Peace Prize? How do you end up teaching at Columbia University's Spook Center? You know who else is also just named a Carnegie Distinguished Fellow at Columbia's Institute for Global Politics? Trump's Central Intelligence Agency Director and Secretary of State. How are you in the same fellowship program? You were just a frigging CNN flunky in Southeast Asia. And then you start your own news organization. No one's ever heard of you. And you're in the same tiny little Institute of Global Politics now with the head of the CIA and the head of the State Department. Two heads of the State Department. Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State from 2009 to 2014. And Mike Pompeo, the head of the State Department from 2018 to 2020. And who else is teaching there alongside you at the exact same program at CIPA? Victoria Nuland on the board of directors of NED and the Assistant Secretary of State. We've talked about many of these university nodes before. We went over this with Arizona State University and their Center on Narrative, Strategic Influence, and Social Media. I blew this up on Joe Rogan, then they self-deleted the website. I went over this with Stanford University and Michael McFall and the Spook Network out of Stanford. I did a whole series of threads on Harvard and the Harvard Belfer Center. But it's funny to see Mike Pompeo, Hillary Clinton, Victoria Nuland, and the hit piece for hire censorship czarina, Maria Ressa, all concurrently out of this Institute of Global Politics at Columbia. Makes you wonder what they're doing there. So when you look at what they're actually doing there, it's quite spicy. Transforming ideas into global policy action. So they are a network from the shadows, manipulating global policy action. Now I say manipulating because a university does not set policy. Governments set policies. Or if there are corporations, for example, in the energy sphere, the corporations set their own policies. University, we're told, just thinks about stuff, right? But they're taking former heads of the CIA, former heads of the State Department, and back-channeling, influencing, leaning on it, like a lobbying group, like a lobbyist, training people. Former Deputy Treasury Secretary, judges, that's not good. Rule of law programs, Christiana Manipur. Boy, there's a lot of spooks at CNN, huh? The former Chief of Staff to the Secretary of Defense, Deputy National Security Advisor, Chair of the Commission on the National Defense Strategy, and a former Congresswoman. Reid Hoffman, billionaire Reid Hoffman, who funded the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit against Trump and who bankrolled New Knowledge. Mike Pompeo, CIA Director. Wendy Sherman, the Deputy Secretary of State, the former EU Commissioner for Energy. DHS, the co-founder and CEO of the Chertoff Group. Spooks. Spooky, spooky. And they're all influencing global policy.